Hello and welcome to this episode of the ABR Garage, where I am joined by one of the biggest stars of motorcycling on YouTube and creator of some of the most engaging and entertaining biking videos around. It is Ryan from FortNine. Welcome to the Garage, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good stuff. Now, it's about 8 a.m. your time in Vancouver. It's 4 p.m. here in the UK. Can you just let us know where you're talking to us from and what's your day going to look like today?
Yeah, so I'm here in our little office. It's in North Vancouver. And what you can see behind me, that would be Luke's desk. He shoots and edits our stuff. And downstairs is where we have our studio, bikes and everything that people tend to see in videos. So the rest of today, I'm writing mostly today. Finished a script yesterday, so Luke's gonna be doing pre-production on that, thinking about how he wants to shoot it. And then we'll meet at the end of the day, talk about the shoot, and then tomorrow we'll be off filming that. So most of our days, 50% of them are kind of writing and editing, and we're in here, and then the other 50% are out and about having fun, shooting and riding and all that good stuff. So
busy times.
I mean, it never feels that terribly busy because it's all this sort of fun. And FortNine is like blessedly hands off. They don't particularly care if we get tied up in a project and don't release anything for 2 months, which is about where we're at right now, actually. So,
well, that's actually a good point to jump in there for people that maybe haven't come across you on YouTube, which there's probably only a few of them because you've got almost 1.4 million subscribers on there, haven't you? But could you explain to the people in the UK that might not have seen what you're up to, what FortNine is? And am I right in thinking that your parents didn't actually christen you Ryan F9? There's another name there as well.
That's right. Yes. Not like in there. FortNine is an e-commerce company in Canada. We always say we're kind of like the Revzilla of Canada is the easiest way to describe it. So most people know that. For you guys would be like the Sports Bike Shop UK of Canada. So we're an online retailer that sells all kinds of motorcycle gear, helmets, jackets, pants, tires, engine parts, whatever. I don't really have anything to do with that side of the company. A, because it's all in Montreal and I don't live there. And B, because they wanted a very hands-off channel from the beginning. They wanted us to have complete creative freedom to say that, this helmet is a piece of shit or whatever, if that's how we feel about that. So we're very, very lucky in that sense. So what I do is just the YouTube channel for FortNine. We're basically tasked with creating content that we find interesting, entertaining, or useful to motorcyclists. And as long as other motorcyclists sometimes feel that way about our content too, then FortNine is very happy. So that's basically the gist of what we do. And I write and present videos, and Luke shoots and edits them. That's it.
Stuff. Well, I'd like to, talk about FortNine and the success it's been in a moment. But if it's okay, just to begin with, to have a little chat about you, because you are the face of FortNine and you're an incredibly recognizable face in the motorcycling world these days. So where did it all begin motorcycling? Often we ask this question and people say their parents, their mum, their dad. Was it similar for you?
A little bit. Yeah. My dad rode. So I knew I had a slight outside chance of convincing my mother to let me get a motorcycle license. I started on dirt. In elementary school, we had this class called library that was like, the teacher would line us all up and march us off to the library. You had to take out a book. That was the rule. But once you had a book, you had like 60 minutes just to kind of stick around and hang with your friends. We figured out very quickly that magazines counted. It was like a bit of a loophole. So you could beeline to the magazine rack, get a Transworld Motocross, take that out, and spend the next 60 minutes flipping through like glossy pages and Travis Pastrana and Ricky Carmichael, Bubba Stewart, the odd Fox and Thor model in a bikini or something. For an 8-year-old, that was just like never, that we would get to do this on school time. So me and my buddies all got into like motocross that way before any of us ever had bikes. We were like 8 years old and come to school in like Fox jerseys. Even though none of us had ever touched a motorcycle. Eventually, enough of us pestered our parents that in a group of like 10 friends, there were like 5 of us that had bikes. So after school every day, we'd go up to the hill behind our house where we had stashed like shovels and rakes that we'd stolen from our parents' sheds, and carved this like really hack motocross track out of a sand pit that was like an active quarry. So some days we'd go up there and everything would just be destroyed because they dug out more gravel or something, we'd have to work again. But we had a little track. We had 5 bikes that ran the gamut from like an XR80 to like a CR, 252 stroke. Some of us were 9 years old, some of us were 16, and we would go race. It was like the epitome of run what you brung, and the skill disparity was enormous. But that's kind of my background, is just like hack garbage motocross.
Yeah, sounds like a great environment to grow up as a kid and learn to love motorbikes, I guess.
Perfect. Yeah, I wouldn't ask for anything else.
That's it. So did you go from riding in the dirt? Did you go to getting your license and riding in the street as you got a bit older?
Yeah, I did. As I said, my dad rode, so we had a DRZ 400 that was plated. I got a job as a park ranger would be the easiest way to describe it. And so to get to work, I had this 12-kilometer Forest Service road, or you could take this 18-kilometer like single track that was a really gnarly enduro trail that also went up to the top of this mountain. And so I was in the fortunate position where I was destroying the family Camry every day, like trying to slug it up and things. So I said, Mom, Dad, if I get my motorcycle license, I promise I'll just use it for work. And I can ride Dad's DRZ up there and the family car will survive. And so it was a dream. I got to ride enduro twice a day, every day on the way to work. I got to convince my parents to let me have a license. And the ironic thing now is that I still use my motorcycle license for work. So my mom, whenever she brings it up, I say, well, it was true. I still do this for work, and it's just been a career building thing. So, it was good that you let me get my license all those years ago. That's sort of how I got into riding street. And then from there, it was just dominoes, got into every bikes, all types of bikes, from there. But
there you go. So how did you do the transition from, you love riding bikes, it's a passion, it's a hobby, it's your commute to work, to going to work in the motorcycle industry? Because that can be a difficult leap to make, can't it?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I just fell ass backwards into it. I was graduating uni in Quebec. I was doing some like freelance writing for magazines. I needed to pay the bills, and there was just this job open from a company called Canada's Motorcycle that wanted a blogger to create an online blog, because at the time that was like the it thing on the internet.
Such an old-fashioned word now, isn't it? Blogger. You don't hear it too often these days.
No one wants to hire bloggers anymore. It hurts me a little bit because I'm definitely a written word guy first. And that's where my heart truly lies. But when I started with Canada's Motorcycle, that's what I was doing. I was writing. And then a little ways in, they decided to rebrand as FortNine. But you don't want to just change your name in the dark one night, because the next day no one will find it on Google. You have to build some SEO recognition. So as part of a branding exercise, we launched this YouTube channel called FortNine, ahead of the website switchover. And it was never really supposed to succeed all that much. It was just supposed to, again, gain some, Google recognition and hopefully get some clicks and help for the digital marketing of the website. But of course the channel did well, and so we ended up sticking with it. So for me, it was incidental. I was just like the closest thing they had to a video person. And so I just got tasked with this YouTube branding exercise.
Yeah, no, I think I read somewhere that you said in the past, or you've been quoted as saying in the past, that it started out, it was quite a small operation. And you even did a review once where you didn't actually have the gear there with you because there wasn't the budget for it. Was that right?
Yes, yeah. I also told this story somewhere. Yeah, it's we were very low budget. And I think the idea of the YouTube channel was like an unproven quantity for the bosses that be. So we said, hey, can we, buy 5 helmets to make this review? Because we knew we wanted to buy everything we reviewed so that we could use it and abuse it if we had to, and say whatever we wanted about it. We didn't want to take freebies from any manufacturers, because then you feel obliged to say nice things. So we wanted to buy them. But the bosses said, it's kind of expensive to buy 5 helmets. So we said, okay, we'll shoot a pilot and we'll just pretend we have the helmets, and we'll just use other objects. So I think we actually had screwdrivers, because I had my toolbox there that day. So I had a Phillips head and a flat head and a Robertson, and we just sort of pretended that those were helmets. And I'm there kind of holding the screwdriver and saying, oh yes, this whatever bell is, very nice and light, and it has this tinted visor, and I've just got the screwdriver. I've searched for the clip because I've just wanted to have it for my own kind of laugh. But thus far, it seems to be lost in the ether of hard drive somewhere in Montreal. So
it may surface on the internet somewhere when you least expect it.
I'd really like to see it. Yeah, I guess it was compelling enough that they let us, buy gear for the next one. So
yeah, it did the job. Good stuff. So you've gone from those early days, and the videos you create now are quite frankly beautiful. They're cinematic. You've got some wonderful stuff there. But did you quickly hit the ground running after those first pilots, or did it take some time to develop that very distinctive FortNine style?
It definitely took time, and it's always in flux. Like the videos that we make a year from now will probably be different from the videos we make now. It's a very organic thing. It just depends a lot on what I'm currently reading or watching that I'm interested in, and what Luke's currently reading or watching he's interested in. We chat about it, in the office in the morning just for fun, and that often brings ideas that we can put into videos. So it's changing all the time. I think in early days, one of the reasons I think that it was successful was because I'm somebody who doesn't particularly like gear. Most of my stuff is like old, gross, the same stuff I've had since 10 years. Jackets, helmets, whatever. I just get something that works and keep doing it. I'm into gear in the sense that I like the science of it, and I like to kind of try to read through the marketing sort of jargon and figure out what's true about a product. I think that comes because when I first started at FortNine, I was writing a lot of marketing materials, kind of hated it. So now I've got a great distaste for marketing and a distaste for the pseudoscience that manufacturers use to represent their gear. So I kind of hated all that world. And so when we went to film gear reviews, it was a bit snarky, and it was not very e-commerce-y. Like most e-commerce websites that have gear reviews will be, very positive. They're sort of almost trying to sell you something. Look at this helmet, it's great. And look at this helmet, it's great. Look at these pants, they're great, and this and that. I never particularly liked gear, so I was always, this helmet's good, but this and this kind of suck. And this helmet I actually really like, but this one is garbage. And so our videos were a little more cutting like that. And I think it was just something new on YouTube at the time, or newer. So they gained a following pretty quick from that. To the extent that we were able to hire a really good videographer in Montreal who was a film student who really loved cinema. And so then we said, great, you're good at that. Let's, try to use it and make really cinematic, artful, beautiful motorcycle reviews. And so we started doing that, and that was popular as well. But that was just sort of the luck of finding a guy who was really into cinema and bikes and wanted to put the two things together.
Yeah, and that's, for me, that's one of the things that really kind of sticks out about FortNine videos, in contrast to an awful lot of great stuff that's out there. People doing really amazing video stuff. It feels like you really care about the narrative and the storytelling of each piece, and then it's layered on top of that with these just incredible visuals. But when it comes to that narrative, and at the beginning, how do you decide what to cover? Because one thing about FortNine is you don't just follow what's on trend or what new bike's out. It seems to be that you pick topics sometimes for us out of random, or is there method to the madness?
It's definitely a mix of method and madness. I think often we're not covering the new stuff out of necessity. We work with press fleets and press bikes, when they're willing, and we're very grateful to receive things from manufacturers. But a lot of the time we get a press bike, we make a video, they don't like some negative things we've said, and they never give us anything else. So a lot of the time we're not covering new bikes simply because we can't get them. And so it's our prerogative to go onto, the used market and say, hey, the Suzuki Bergman is actually a really interesting, cult following scooter. Why don't we buy one and do justice of that machine there? I studied physics in university, so oftentimes my own personal interest is in the engineering of objects. So, for example, when we made a video with the Yamaha T7, I noticed that the sprocket was unusually high, and that angle would change the way the rear tire behaved in terms of anti-squat, and that was actually very consequential for an adventure bike of that size. So I said, great, we're going to make this whole review revolve around this idea of anti-squat. If people watch this 7-minute video, I just want them to understand what anti-squat is and why it's cool that the T7 has it. and we'll make the entire narrative approach that peak.
It's quite a brave approach, isn't it? It's very different. It's quite a brave approach to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is. You're in the magazine world, so you probably know this better than I, but I always had editors that were like, what's the angle? What's the angle, right? You'd present them a story that was, beautifully full of ideas, and they just want to cut it all away and say, this is your point, like chase this, let's build the story up to this. So I've taken that to video. I try to distill a topic to the one thing that I find really interesting and compelling, and then build the whole narrative around that. Because usually, like, I'm an enthusiast. I read and watch about bikes all the time, and most of the information is just like, oh yeah, cool, yep, good to know. And then there's usually one thing that's like, I never thought about that before. That's really interesting. So we try to find that thing and then make the video about that, because there's lots of videos out there that do a great job of covering the information of a topic. And if that's what you're looking for, then those videos are perfect for that. We try to offer something else, because if we duplicate something that's successful, it won't be successful, because why watch ours when you can just watch this thing that's already out there? So yeah, I think that's why we do it the way we do it.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that, you have a big passion for motorcycles, which comes across. A little bit like myself, when you're not at work, you're usually reading or talking about motorcycles or riding motorcycles. Do you think that is key to the success? Do you think you would have been as successful if you'd maybe come to this not really knowing about motorcycles, but went along because it's a job?
That's a very interesting question, because I think to some extent that is how I came at it. I was a rider and have always been into bikes, but I wasn't necessarily more interested in motorcycles than I was mountain bikes or skateboarding or literature, writing. I had a variety of interests. Motorcycles happened to be the field where I found a job. And so then I pursued the hell out of it. And now I think the passion I built for motorcycles is much bigger than the other ones in my life. But a lot of that just comes from doing. You can learn an incredible amount in your career. Occasionally people will say, like, how did you come up with this idea? Or like, how do you know about these things? And it's like, man, I'm paid to sit here for 10 hours a day, like researching motorcycles. No, it's a luxury that, almost nobody has. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think to a large extent that the passion's just grown inside of the job.
Yeah. And so looking at your videos, so I've watched them for a number of years now, really enjoy them. And I'm afraid I don't know the timeline, because I kind of dip in and out to lots of different ones, but it struck me that there's a couple that stick out in my mind. And I wonder if those are ones that kind of were a bit of not a turning point for you, but made you realize that you'd hit your stride. Or I remember the Africa Twin, the CRF1100L, I think, Africa Twin video, and the KTM 1090 Adventure video. And I remember watching those and thinking, these are so different and they're so entertaining, and it's so not what I was expecting, from a motorcycle channel. Were they kind of quite prominent moments in FortNine's development, or is there something else that, really sticks out of, we've found our style, this is us?
Yeah, I think you've picked very good ones there. For sure, I think the Africa Twin video was a bit of a watershed one for us. Mad Max had just came out. We were all really kicked on it. And so this idea that we wanted to do kind of a Mad Max style video. At the same time, we had traveled to Quebec City to shoot a travel video there. Met a guy named Jobert, who's an adventure rider, and he told us about this asbestos mine in a town called Tring Junction that's closed, but all the old asbestos tailings and piles and everything is all still there. And of course, it's very mineral, so the water that collects turns this like electric aqua blue. The dirt tailings themselves are like this weird moon gray because it's all like asbestos. And it created this completely otherworldly, alien looking landscape. It's to this day probably the coolest sort of single place I've ever ridden. And also the most dangerous. I mean, if you're there on a bad day, you're kicking up asbestos dust and potentially taking years off your life. But if you're there on a wet day and the asbestos mostly stays down, like, man, it's just the coolest. And it's also the sandbox playground for that community. So there's just motocross and hill climbs and trails all through there. So I think It was a perfect storm. It was the right location. We had, recent experience to Mad Max, which I think was the right primer to make that video. And then I think we had an interesting bike in the Africa Twin at the time. It was a very important and new type of adventure bike. It was a big video for us as well. I'm glad to hear that it came across that way for you.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. And I think watching those videos, I think there is that cinematic element to it that makes it obvious that it's not just you and a GoPro on set. Kind of how many people do you have with you? Is there a big crew? Is it run and gun style filming? What sort of, what goes into making a video like that looks epic?
If it were me and a GoPro, the video would be terrible. We were chatting about before we sort of started recording here. I'm a huge technophobe. I know nothing about cameras. I know nothing about filming. I don't do any of that stuff. So the team is hugely important. And I sort of want to preface it by saying that because it's also extremely small. It's one person who shoots and edits our stuff, but he's a wizard with a camera and with his editing software. And he can make something that looks extremely cinematic, working by himself and with a pretty minimal kit. In the case of the Africa Twin video, we actually had another person there who was driving a vehicle. So we were able to get some sort of side-by-side shots, which is quite important because if Luke's hanging out the window with a camera, then someone has to be driving the car. So sometimes we're, myself and 2 other people on a shoot, sometimes myself and 3 other people on a shoot, but 95% of FortNine videos is just myself and the videographer on a shoot. We find it's very quick to run and gun with a 2-man team. You also don't get kicked out of places as much. Filming is one of these weird things where you're not technically allowed to film most places. They tend to be private property or city property. You need a permit and insurance and blah, blah, blah. And all those things are prohibitively expensive for YouTube channels. So your best bet is just to have a small camera and a small team so you look like tourists and nobody bothers to tell you to get lost. So that's been useful for us.
Have you ever been kicked out of anywhere?
Oh, every shoot almost. Yeah. The coolest places are all in that fringe area, where you have a feeling we're probably not supposed to be here. Like the asbestos mine in Tring Junction, like a company definitely owns that, like someone has graciously gone before you and cut a great big hole in the fence. So there's full deniability where you might roll up to it and say, "Whoa, there's an opening here and it must be open to the public."
Like an entrance, go on.
No, it's not true. And if a representative of the company comes around, they're going to say, "Hey, this is private property, better," and, take a hike. And then we have to say, "Oh yes, very, very sorry." And if we can, we'll try to find the owner, because then you can kind of go to them and say, "Hey, this place is so cool and this would look so great. And we're passionate guys and we're trying to make this film. And, would it be okay with you if we stayed here and filmed here?" And sometimes people say yes, sometimes they still say no because of liability and all kinds of completely comprehensible reasons. And so then it's just, very understandable, sorry. And we get lost. It happens almost every shoot.
Fair enough. So you've gone from riding motocross with your mates, commuting to work, being a copywriter for a bike company, to being a hugely influential person in the motorcycling world. The YouTube channel's got, I think it's almost 1.4 million subscribers, isn't it? And you're an incredibly recognizable face. Did you ever think this would happen? Did you ever think it would come to this point?
Definitely not. No. It's always surreal and humbling to hear people say stuff like that, because it seems like it shouldn't be the case. So when I started at FortNine, I didn't have any particular special knowledge about motorcycles. I've kind of built a knowledge through this job, but I'm not a pro racer. I'm not a professionally trained mechanic. And so it's kind of weird to be influential in that sense. People talk a lot nowadays about how we're living in the age of the death of expertise, how the people that have influence and are listened to are not the most intelligent or knowledgeable people. They're the most entertaining. It's the person who can get online and say sensationalist stuff, be very captivating, be very entertaining. They tend to be the thought leaders rather than the people who actually really know what they're talking about, but maybe they're a boring person, a bookish person. Yeah. Studies in a lab somewhere or races on a circuit, but really just kind of focuses on themselves. Those people are harder to listen to, even though they have better things to say. So we tend to listen to people who, for better or worse, can tell a funny joke and speak charismatically on camera. That tends to be where people. So I think that's the way of the world, and it's also kind of the way of me. It's like really
I'm a fake. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You know, I'm not sure whether anyone should be listening to me all that much, but for better or worse, it's kind of what happened.
And that's quite an interesting point that you say that kind of expertise might be dying, and a lot of your videos, you go into a lot of detail, a lot of the scientific side of things, with your educational background in physics that others might not go into. And do you feel a sense of responsibility more now than you used to, that so many people are watching you and so many people do take notice of what you say? Does it influence your output?
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. The pressure grows all the time, to, yes, produce something entertaining and interesting, but more than anything, accurate, factual. YouTube is brilliant in that you release something and you immediately have 3,000 people's responses to it. If you make a mistake, they will catch it.
Very quickly.
Hey, this thing you said is completely wrong. You're an idiot. And that's, I think, a good thing, because the platform sort of, fact checks itself. And so, yeah, I feel that pressure when I'm doing something, particularly anything that portends to be scientific. I try to work very hard to make it scientific. And if I'm making statements about the physics of something, I try to make sure that that's rigorous and accurate. That tends to be why I stay in those lanes, because it is the thing that I'm at least trained in. So I am more confident presenting a physics description of something than I am, say, an economic description of something. We've delved briefly into economics. We did a Harley video that was largely economically based. The one I wrote yesterday,
I watched that one, yeah.
Is about dealerships and the sort of direct-to-consumer model and how those two things relate and how they might relate in the future. More economical, and those are really stressful for me to write, because I didn't study economics, so I have to, sort of do double diligence and trying to make sure that the things I'm saying are good and worthy and worthwhile, because people are going to see them. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it comes across very well. And something else that also I think comes across in your videos, and quite handy for me because I edit Adventure Bike Rider magazine, is that you cover a lot of gear, you cover a lot of different bikes, but it does seem to be that adventure biking is your passion, or is probably your most favored form of motorcycling. Perhaps I'm just reading into it because it's mine, but is that an area of biking that you really do love?
Yeah, I think it is. I definitely tend towards the dirt. Adventure bikes are sort of this happy middle ground where they have broad appeal to motorcyclists because they're kind of like street bikes, but then you can off-road on them. So I think we end up in that realm a lot for that reason. If it were just me on my own personal riding time, I'd be more on the dual sport side of the adventure spectrum. I tend to like small, more trail-centric dual sports. In my own personal riding, that's the type of thing I do. But for sure on the channel, yeah, lots of adventure bikes. And I love adventure bikes too. I do adventure riding in my own time, and I've got an F800 GS, and it's definitely something that's close to my heart as well. And in Vancouver, it's the thing to do. This is sort of adventure bike mecca. So it's the right type of machine to have around here.
Good stuff. And that kind of brings me on to a couple of questions time that I had in mind, but Canada, it's almost a star of the videos as well, or it's a co-star of the videos. I spent quite a lot of time there myself over the years, and I enjoy tuning in to seeing where you are, even if it's a backlot in Vancouver, or if you're off in the woods or the mountains or something. What makes Vancouver, a wonderful place to be an adventure biker, or is it really bad and you're just making it look good?
No, it's good. It's legitimately very good. I think Canada in general is a great place to be an adventure biker because our cities, there aren't very many of them, and they're very self-contained. And as soon as you're outside of the city, you're kind of in the wilderness. So Vancouver is very much like that. We have our urban metropolis, but you can go 30 minutes in either direction and be, Brom Peak next to the glacier, riding sort of above the tree line. sort of scree stuff, cliff edge roads. Like it's all really, really close by. So that I think is one of the reasons why it's great to be an adventure biker here. Vancouver's better than most places in Canada for motorcycling because it hardly snows. Like a lot of people here ride year round. It's very easy to do. There's, maybe 2-3 weeks that we get snow, but for most of the year, it's great motorcycling weather. That's one of the reasons why I moved from Montreal. Montreal is probably my favorite city in Canada, but 6 months of the year you are buried under snow. So for someone in my career, it's maybe not the best place to be, but.
Am I right in thinking that motorcycles aren't allowed in central Montreal? Is that correct?
Yeah, Quebec City. Yeah.
Quebec.
Quebec City, there are no motorcycles allowed. There's no motorcycle signs. The main reason for it is the Quebec Biker War. Something happened back in maybe late 90s, early 2000s. Between the Hells Angels and some rival gangs, there was a huge amount of violence. Bunch of assassinations and car bombings and various things, and people kind of their taste for men on Harleys. Unfortunately, the way legislature works is they often hit things with a big hammer that should maybe be taken to with a scalpel, so they just nuked the idea of motorcycles in downtown Quebec. I know there were other considerations as well. Quebec City is a neat city. It's an old city. It's a walled city. So within the city walls, there's we're in lower Quebec, and a lot of those roads are very steep. They're cobblestoned. It's probably more like a lot of cities in Europe, and very touristy. So a lot of those roads are pedestrianized anyway. I think loud motorcycles in that part of downtown was not something that a large part of the population was keen on. I'm not sure why I'm justifying it because I completely disagree. I hate it.
Just defending Canada. It's okay. It's okay.
I understand why the decision was made, even though it's a bad one.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, you love adventure biking, love being in the dirt. Over here in the UK, and potentially in Europe as well, kind of a lot of adventure biking is done on the road. It's pretty well known that if you buy a 1250 GS or a Multistrada or something like that, the vast majority of people spend their time touring on the road. To be honest with you, I probably spend 90% of my time on the road. I know earlier on in FortNine's life that you did various travel stories, particularly out east, wasn't it? I thought they were fantastic. And do you do a lot of touring yourself, sort of just exploring on the road, or you've left that behind now?
I don't do a ton of it, to be honest. I take a few weeks off every year, and I spend them with my family. So the idea of, pitching to the wife, hey, I'm going to go and, ride to Ukiah for, 3 months is something that doesn't sell very well. So I don't tour long distances much. Usually every year I'll do a few, and they're brilliant. I went down to Pennsylvania for a rally. I went down to Nashville a few years ago. Pre-COVID, travel hasn't been much of a thing since, but I like doing long touring when I can. But for me, most of my adventure riding, as I've said, is kind of the small dual sport type. I like little bikes where I can tootle to and from work every day on it. And then if I get in early and work hard and I can knock off at 3 p.m., then I can go and crush trails for a couple hours and still make it. That's my type of adventure biking. And that's what I spend most of my time doing. I tend not to, pie in the sky, dream and plan about these kind of faraway trips. I just sort of focus on where am I riding today at 3:00? And those tend to be my adventures. The last little while, actually, they're, I guess, building a huge development or something. They put down maybe a square kilometer of just huge sand, preloading, I guess, for building something. And again, some enterprising person has gone ahead and cut a nice hole in the fence, and it's become this dirt bike playground with just sort of beach sand, really. So that's been my thing for the last week, is just stopping by there on the way somewhere and sort of practicing sand skills for a while. So all that to say, I adventure ride, but I don't go terribly far.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just love the thought of that, of, kind of filming these incredible videos and then on your way home, just going through a fence and just ripping up with a bunch of local kids or something. It's brilliant. It's great. Yeah. And we're kind of the same. We, in the UK here, we call it green laning. and it's riding legal trails, which are technically roads. You know, there's not many of them, but we hunt them out. And yeah, after work, we'll all get together and just go and ride a few of those and just, enjoy blowing off some steam. So it's good to do, isn't it?
I'd love to ride in the UK a bit. I mean, I've seen videos of riding over there. The terrain looks pretty different from what we have in BC for sure. Less trees, more rolling hills, grasslands, things like that. So it would definitely be a different experience.
Yeah, we squeeze a lot into a small space. So, you know, you won't go for days on end through remote wilderness, but you might have a really nice 2 or 3 hours. So
I mean, that's kind of my bread and butter. So at the end of that.
That's it. And so you mentioned you'd like to ride in the UK. Have you ridden abroad anywhere, or is there anywhere in the world that is really on your bucket list?
I mean, I know of some epic rides where it's like, if I was in that part of the world with a bike, absolutely, I'd want to do it. I think everyone thinks about trying to get through the Darien Gap or something like that. Riding up to Tuktoyaktuk, but no, I mean. As I was kind of touching on before, like I don't spend a ton of time thinking about these big faraway rides. I tend to just focus on, where I'm going today, which tends to be sort of nearby stuff. Most of my riding has been in Canada and the States. And that's
pretty amazing place to ride.
In the States is so heterogeneous. It's like really cool. Washington and Oregon is so different from Idaho and Utah, which is so different from Arizona and Nevada, and down in the southern California, it's like you don't have to ride very far and the environment changes a whole lot, which is really, really cool. In Canada, I love Canada and it's very wild, but man, you got to ride a really long distance before you start to see a change in terrain. Everything is terribly far apart. And if you go north, it's just tundra for like 4 days. Like nothing changes. It's just, sort of flatline tundra, which is gorgeous and really cool, but, not as heterogeneous as the States is.
I have to admit, to an Englishman, there's something very appealing about crossing Canada and not seeing the landscape change, particularly from one day to the next There's I hope I wouldn't get bored. I'd hope I'd just be in a meditative state and enjoy riding in a straight line. But who knows? I don't know. I've never done it.
Yeah, I've done the cross Canada trip, and it is phenomenal. I highly recommend it. Like one of probably one of the coolest trips that I've ever done. When you've come to Canada, where have you been? I mean, you mentioned that you've been out here a few times.
Yeah, so I used to spend my childhood with an aunt. Like many English people, we have relatives in Canada. I used to in Ontario, just north of Toronto, and just outside Belleville, cottage country, basically. On aunt and uncle lived on a lake there, so I used to spend my summers fishing and swimming and riding a quad bike and canoeing and doing all those things that I didn't do back in England, and loving every second of it. And spent a bit of time, spent a few months living in Banff in Alberta.
Okay.
And explored BC and Vancouver Island and things like that on a backpacking year. And I love Canada. Took my wife there for the first time a couple of years ago before everything went crazy, and she fell in love with it as well, thank God. So we get back as often as we can, because it is a wonderful place to be. But I've never ridden there. I've never ridden a motorbike there, so I want to. I'm desperate to.
If you come by Vancouver, I can put you on a bike and go somewhere.
Good stuff. You mentioned a bit earlier your BMW F800 GS. We see that in a lot of videos. One of my favorite videos of yours or your team's was your review of it when you started This Is Not a Bike Review, which was great. Can you just sort of tell us a little bit why that bike? Because from the outsider's perspective, you might have your choice of any bike, or is that not the case? It's just the right bike at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was the right bike. It was, the thing I wanted most. I've always loved the F800 GSA. Well, I love the F800 platform, because to me, that's right where an adventure bike should be, because I find myself too limited on the bigger ones. I'm not a talented enough rider to really crush trails on a 1250 GS, much as I want to and love to. When I'm doing it, you get yourself in a tight spot and suddenly you have to lift 600 pounds.
It's hard, isn't it? Yeah.
So to me, that 800 was just always sort of perfect, because it'll happily cruise at 130, which is what you want on the Trans Canada. Like, it's a big long road. You really want to be able to do 130 comfortably. But it's still light enough that, you can thrash the thing off-road a little bit. And then the GSA, which is the spec I have, has the bigger tank. The range on the thing is like ridiculous. When you fill that tank up, it'll just go forever until you have to fill it again. So to me, it's like, at least at the time, it was the perfect adventure bike. Now I think it's become a dinosaur. Like that 800 class has really been usurped by your T7s, your KTM 790s, which are much smaller and lighter, but have the same horsepower. The T7, I spent quite a while on that bike. It's as comfortable and capable on the highway as my F800 GSA is, but it's way lighter and it feels much more like a dirt bike. And I'm way less stressed riding it into tricky off-road situations because I know if I get myself in a pickle, I can pick the thing up and get back out. I mean, not literally, but it's pretty easy to move around in there. And you'll just roll up to things you'd never roll up to on the F800 GSA. When we were filming with the T7, there was this kind of dirt bikey hill climb, and we were sort of laughing about it, like, haha, it'd be fun to go up there. But after riding the T7 for a bit, I was like, you know what? This thing could go up there. Like, we could do that. Whereas on the F800, I just never try it because it feels so much more like a street bike, even though they're the same capacity. So I think the adventure bike has evolved. The F800 GSA is not something that I think makes a ton of sense anymore. But it's still a phenomenal bike, and it's my bike, and I love it. And now I'm kind of attached to the thing.
Is there a bike out there that kind of money, no objects? There's a space in your garage for it. Your wife's happy for you to spend the money on it. That you see and you think, yeah, I'd love to get my hands on one of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's many. It's a miracle I don't have a garage full of 10 bikes, because if I had the money, I probably would. If I could make the F800 GS disappear, yeah, I'd probably put a T7 in my garage right now.
Yeah.
But I know that the hit I'd take on selling the F800 GS is enormous, because it's been a very abused bike. And I feel like I have some responsibility for it now, so maybe I won't sell it. If I were to add something to the garage, yeah, that's a tough one. We just did a video on an Alta Redshift MX, the electric motocrosser.
Oh, yeah.
I fell in love with that thing. That's an incredible bike. So I think if money were no object, I'd probably try to get my hands on an Alta Redshift EXR, which is the one with a license plate and indicators and a headlight.
Yeah.
Me, that would just be the coolest, because I could tootle to and from work on it and then go and ride motocross. Like it's a very competent motocrosser enduro race bike. So that would be near the top of my list. But yeah, there's so much stuff. Yeah. A lot of old bikes. Like I tend to buy and sell a lot of old bikes. I tend to be interested more in those than the new ones. So I've always wanted an XR 650R. I've always wanted an XR 400 grandfathered. ICBC, the way insurance works here, they changed the rules a few years ago, where now, unless the bike left the factory as street legal, you have no chance of making a bike street legal. Right. Didn't always used to be that way. So I think pre-2010-ish, if you had a dirt bike and you put a headlight and indicators on it, you could get a plate and ride it like a dual sport. And when they changed the rule, they didn't go back and pick plates off of the bikes that already had them. So every once in a while, you'll get a cool old XR 400 or WR 450 or like a dirt bike that runs around with a plate still, because when you go to quietly change the title, the person behind the desk doesn't really know motorcycles, and they just let it keep happening. So every time one of those pops up, I'm extremely tempted to grab it and have a little piece of unobtainium. So that would be high on the list. Yeah, I don't know what else. Yeah, lots of stuff.
Too much choice. Ryan, I could sit here and ask you questions about FortNine and your life and bikes all day, but I know it's almost the start of the working day there, or coming out to about 9 o'clock in Canada. So I will let you go and script and create and publish some, more great content, because I really enjoy it. I know, lots of people here in the UK do. So, please do keep up that work. 'Cause it's great to watch. It's great viewing.
Yeah, much appreciated. It was fun chatting with you, James. And, anytime, hopefully we can arrive in the same country at some time in the future and meet in person.
Excellent. Good stuff. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.